Good morning, everyone. My name is Pascal Dauptin. I'm the Global Advertising Product Director at the New York Times, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's session, how to cut food waste. Before I hand over to my colleague Kim Severson, I would like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Lips by Bayer, and play a short video. Yet before that, I would like to remind our digital audiences that they can submit their questions online.
It's an honor to be part of this important gathering parallel to COP26. And I'm grateful to the New York Times for bringing us together. I'd like to share how some companies from the Leaps by Bayer portfolio are working to tackle climate change through breakthrough innovation.
The issue is only 4% of farmers grow cover crops. Why? Because of the extra inputs necessary, just the extra work in general. CoverCress removes that barrier by providing an economic incentive to growing a cover crop, where you don't have to give up farming any food crops, but you're adding a third crop that can be used for biodiesel applications.
We are expecting to be on well over 10 million acres. The opportunity is the production of close to 20 million barrels of renewable fuel.
Seeing CoverCress planted at scale like this gives me hope for the future to find new solutions to old problems before they get worse.
Hello, good morning, intrepid panel goers. Thank you. We have such a great panel. I appreciate everyone coming, and I'm Kim Severson, and I write about food for the New York Times. And this has been a great week, a great couple of weeks here, and we appreciate everyone who's come out to the sessions, and appreciate all of the vast virtual audience that we have. So this is I think our last day of full programming, and this is a panel that I've been really looking forward to about food waste, because I'm a cook, I'm a consumer, and food waste feels like something that I can actually do something about when it comes to climate change, but there's also incredible global implications with food waste. So we're going to dig right in. I think do we have two virtual panelists? Where are they? Oh, look at that, through the magic of technology. Edie Mukiibi, I'm sorry I messed your name up. He is from Uganda, Vice President of Slow Food, an organization I know well. And over here we have Geeta Sethi, who's an advisor and global lead for food systems at the World Bank, who did a wonderful job at our debate the other day. Thank you very much. And next to me we have Pam Brunton, who's a chef, who's really, someone told me you're from the States, the Alice Waters of Scotland, creating a more sustainable, hyper-Scottish cuisine at her restaurant Inver. She's done work for both Sustain and the Soil Association on issues around food justice and cooking. And now Iain, who is a co-founder of the Field to Bottle Distillery, Arbikie. Arbikie. I'm saying that was like saying Arbikie. Arbikie.
Good Scottish name.
A very Scottish name, and I'm obviously not Scottish. So, and then Jamie Crummy, who's a co-founder and director at Too Good To Go, which is kind of one of the many tech solutions that are out there. This connects customers to restaurants and stores that have unsold food surplus. So obviously, tech's playing a big role in how we're solving food waste. So I was wondering, Geeta, could we start with you just to give us kind of a good overview and tell us why addressing food waste matters as it relates to countries meeting their climate goal. We'll get really micro on this and talking about what you can do in your own kitchen, but from the world perspective, how important is food waste?
Thank you so much, and a very good morning to everybody. It's only 4:30 now in Washington, D.C., so I'm delighted to be here. But I think that's a very good question. You're exactly right. Food loss and waste is everybody's problem. Rich countries, developing world, rural settings, urban settings. And it is absolutely true that countries cannot achieve their Paris commitments without addressing losses and waste. Not just about greenhouse gas emissions, which is almost 8% of total emissions at the moment, which means if food loss and waste was a country, it would be the third highest emitter. So it's very clear on the carbon footprint. But more importantly, agriculture and food already uses 70% of fresh water. And food that's produced and uses fresh water and never reaches the table is 25%. 80 million hectares of land is used for food that doesn't reach the table. So it's no longer just about carbon, it's a moral imperative. At the same time, in this world, 3 billion people are suffering from some aspect of undernourishment, not enough calories, going hungry, or eating wrong kinds of calories. So if one puts all of this in perspective, you kind of wonder, why is the world or countries not focusing on food loss and waste? And let me just take one more minute and say, you know, we got on this journey a couple of years ago, most at that pre-COVID, and the world puts food loss and waste and food security in the same sentence. But governments know how to feed their people. It's about distribution issues. I'm not undermining, but addressing losses and waste is a carbon issue. It's a climate issue. And having said that, you know, human beings are very rational. And so the question for us is, why is this industry, you know, throwing 1/3 of its food out? I mean, does Sony produce 3 TVs and throws one out? So there is something happening in the food systems that allows people to behave unrationally. And one of the things that we hit upon is food prices. And you know the story from the whole week that we've been hearing about this, that the food system currently does not acknowledge the hidden costs of food. In other words, we are producing, the food sector is $1 trillion. The hidden cost of food system vis-a-vis people's health and a bankrupt planet is $12 trillion. So clearly, if we price food differently, we are going to have an impact on losses and waste, and that's exactly what we found in our economic modeling. But more importantly, addressing losses and waste, not just the carbon, but it also addresses the biodiversity issue, it addresses the health crisis, and it addresses the food security. So with that, let me pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And let's go from that big to a micro. And Pam, let me ask you, this idea of what food really costs and selling it to consumers. We're obviously all used to shopping what the sale for the tomato is at the store, and we don't really realize the actual cost of what it takes to make that. At your restaurant, tell us a little bit about how you approach food costs, but also your philosophy around waste. And we had talked about you conceptualizing a dish from the start, not what do I do after I have all the peelings. So can you talk a little bit about your restaurant, but also about how you make consumers understand the real price of food?
Yeah, I mean, these are big questions. I don't think these are micro questions at all. But yeah, I mean, I think what we were talking about before is when we imagine how we're going to create a dish in the restaurant, if we take into consideration how to generate as little waste as possible from the beginning, not kind of let's prepare this carrot and then work out what to do with the carrot peelings and the carrot trimmings, but actually look at the carrot and say, well, this carrot is not a cube. So if I cut this into little squares, there's going to be a whole bunch of it that just gets waste. Well, let's not cut it into little squares. Let's not worry about that at all. Let's cut the minimum possible off the outside of the carrot, slice it into shapes that look like carrots, be that circles or strips, and then accept that my plate is not going to look as controlled, as tidy as you might see Michelin-starred type fine dining plates look, and accept that. I mean, I think there's a lot of ego and control that goes into a certain kind of dining where we're trying to make things look different to how they actually appear in nature. Whereas we're trying to flip that a little bit and say, well, let's keep these vegetables and this fish and this meat looking, well, maybe stopping short of the meat. We probably don't try and present the whole pig on a plate. But try and represent.
Not yet.
Not the one plate.
And you'll take somebody else like a halibut head and collar, which is not necessarily the most beautiful thing. It's delicious,
I think they
course.
look awesome, but they.
All right.
But no, they're certainly not a presentation of a fish that you usually see.
And are diners accepting this?
Yeah, it's become one of the iconic things that we do at Inver. People will now come and ask, is there going to be a halibut head on that night? Can I book one in advance? Because obviously for every fish, you might have 20 portions of fillet, but you're only going to have one head.
So it makes it special.
Yeah, which I find it quite a fascinating thing to be happening now, because as well as cutting food waste, we also wanted to be able to serve the head because in itself, it's a fantastic eating experience. In different parts of the world, in China, in Spain, that you give the fish head to your most honoured guest. You know, it's a delicacy, whereas in Scotland and great parts of the Western world, you don't really look at fish heads as being something that you eat at all. It's garbage. But
if you get those changes in the global north happening, and as we know at the higher echelons of food, fashion, film, when change starts there, then it trickles down. So you've got to have.
It becomes it normalizes it. So young cooks working with us can move on in their careers and then say, well, why are we putting that fish head in the bin? You know.
So you're creating an army of change with cooks who come through your kitchen to learn about this.
We're one tiny restaurant in a tiny country, and
only takes one.
Yeah, well.
Which these guys will tell you here in a minute. I want to get to some of your solutions, but first I just want to go to you, Eddie, for a second. Is food waste in your world an issue, and not only from slow food, but where you live in Uganda? What is the approach toward food waste?
Good morning, everyone. Actually, food waste and food loss are global issues, and they affect each and everyone. Both in the global north, both in the developed countries and also in the developing world, food waste and food loss are still very, very important issues and challenges to tackle. In some countries, there is quite a lot of food, and people think that there is enough food for everyone to eat. But on the other side, close to 1 billion people, they don't even have hope of finding what to eat. While also in other countries, it's a question of consumers wasting food before it reaches the plate. But again, in many other countries, like here in the global south, there is also a very big part of the food that is lost at the production level. This should also go well recognized and accounted for. Much of the food in this part of the world where I live is lost between harvesting and also distribution, mostly by the farmers because of the technological challenges. But again, we cannot ignore the fact that even the little food that makes it to the plate or makes it to the supermarket or the market shelves is again wasted at that level. So it's a double trouble in some countries. So it's really important to recognize this and support the different players at the food value chain on how to mitigate food loss and food waste. So it's really for us, not only in the slow food world, but also here where I live, it's really important to mobilize communities to improve the way we handle food, right from the production level to the distribution, through the distribution system, but also to mobilize people who are handling food at the end of the value chain, like cooks and chefs, bringing them together to work on the issue of food loss and food waste, because quite a lot of food, again, is wasted in the kitchen. So it's important to mobilize people, different categories of people, around this specific problem of food loss and food waste. Again, as as Slow Food, we have the Slow Food Youth Network. We believe that also young people have a very big role to play in stopping food waste, because not only because losing and wasting food has a direct impact on our future, but also we are the people who waste most of the food, we the young people. So it's important to mobilize. What we do is to mobilize young people, equip them with tools, with the knowledge, with the capacity, not only to sensitize them, but also to help them and equip them with these tools and the capacity to tackle the challenges we face when it comes to food waste.
Eddie, so you said that young people tend to waste more food. Tell me a little bit more about that. I assumed that all the young people knew things now that we didn't and are much more careful about food waste, but is it because they're just not aware, or they're not cooking as much, or why do you say young people waste more food? Oh, maybe he's frozen. We've lost you. When he comes back, we're going to get the answer to that very important question. Geeta, did you want to say something?
But it's something, just adding to what Eddie said, you know, it's very fascinating. For the longest time, we thought losses was a global south problem and waste is a global north problem. And recently, there's been some work done from RAP and others that's very clear that the per capita waste is about 72 kilos per year. Waste, okay, household waste. And there is no sensitivity to GDP. In other words, whether you are a developing world or developed world, it looks the same.
Interesting.
And similarly on losses, you know, 1/3 of food is lost, and you know, capacity, resources, etc., etc. And people tend to say, well, it's a global south issue. No, recently WWF has done work on the US, and the losses from post-harvest losses look exactly the same. Back to you. I just wanted to put that snippet in.
Thank you. Eddie, you're back. Hi.
Yes.
We were talking about youth and waste, and is that, just tell me a little bit about that. Are young people screwing this up more than we did? How is that possible?
It's possible because many young people adopt new food consumption cultures. And these food cultures actually have a very strong, they're rooted in the consumerism approach to handling food issues, whereby you think that you have the right to eat something or not to eat something that has grown up in a specific way. And also, because many young people have been disconnected to the realities of food production, they don't really understand that food goes beyond the commodity which you consume. It goes beyond the commodity which you see in the supermarket, but it has other several meanings, like deep-rooted cultural meanings to the societies which produce food, deep-rooted meanings to the environment where the food was produced. So this kind of disconnect between young people and the realities of the food system makes them not to think about other issues which are connected to the food which they have on the plate, or which they have in their hands at that specific moment in time.
Great, thank you.
So that's how young people have a big role to play in stopping food waste, because we also have a role to play in wasting food.
Right. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit, Jamie, about technological solutions, which are vast, both at the farming and the processing level, but also at the consumer level, and the kids and their technology. Maybe this will save us. But tell us a little bit about why you decided to start your app and how the food waste landscape looks from your perspective.
Yeah, no, it would be my pleasure. And first of all, thanks very much for inviting me here today. I think, when we look at Too Good To Go and our solution itself, it was very much born out of the Sustainable Development Goals. So Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, which calls on food waste and loss to be halved by 50% by 2030. And this is what really sort of inspired us to create a platform which empowered people. And that is really at the center of what we're trying to do. It's using technology as a force to empower and inspire not just individuals, but businesses as well, to make sustainable choices and actually have the ability to take action against food waste. And I think, what's been mentioned so far is so powerful. I think to echo what's been said, food waste is such a huge climate issue. And the sad reality is it hasn't really been discussed here at COP, apart from in great fringe events. And I think this is something that we as an organization are really trying to push more, which is ensuring that food waste becomes part of these global solutions. I mean, when we look at the amount of countries which has involved food waste in their national determined contributions, it's 6%. It's 6% on something which, to repeat what was mentioned earlier, food waste was a country. It'd be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter after the US and China. So it really is bonkers that isn't on the table. But I guess going back to what we're doing with Too Good To Go, it is a online marketplace which connects individuals with businesses who have surplus food for sale. And it's very much trying to change the way in which we refer to food waste. When we talk about things as food waste, it's suggesting that it is a product which has no value. But let's start referring it to surplus food, because it's something that we can eat and we can enjoy. So we work with 120,000 different food businesses globally across 17 countries in North America and Europe. And we have over 45 million users who have actually, as of today, rescued 100 million meals from going to waste. And I don't say that to show off, but really it gives me such huge amounts of optimism how not just individuals, but businesses are trying to seek solutions to ensure that their perfectly good food doesn't go to waste. And
Can you give us just an example of how it works for people who might not understand? So I'm a company and I have, say I have meetings and I have a lot of extra pastries at a meeting, and how do the sides come together for this surplus food, which is now what I'm going to start saying instead of waste? But just give us a sort of a practical so people understand how your app works.
So I'll use an example that we all probably know. We've all probably had a coffee or a pastry from Starbucks. And we're very fortunate to be able to work with them across many of the markets in which we operate in. And they'll produce fresh food every single day. And often it's very hard for a business to understand and cater for the amount of people which come in. So there's often food left over. In fact, there's always food left over. So rather than having to throw sandwiches, salads, yogurt pots, pastries, etc. away, it gets packed up into a surprise bag. So consumers go onto the app, they pay a reduced price, and then go and collect a surprise bag full of delicious treats during a collection window, which is typically like the last 60 minutes or so of service. And it's a way for us as the individual, as I say, to be empowered to do something about food waste, discover new foods and things like that. But it's also an opportunity for a business to not have to throw their food away, to recover sunk costs and reduce their waste disposal costs. And one of the panelists mentioned earlier, I struggle to think of another industry which produces their core product every single day and throws it away. Who produces one in three televisions to throw one away? So it really doesn't make sense. And again, this is a solution which is empowering businesses, but empowering individuals to make a difference.
And tell us again, how many users do you have now?
45 million. Yeah.
Right, impressive. And tell us the name of the app again so people
It's
can...
Too Good To Go, yeah.
Too Good To Go.
So I will do a shameless plug and say it is probably the coolest, if not the greatest app around.
All right. He had to say that. Okay, now, so we have the youth and their tech solution, and here is, not to say, we'll call you an experienced and mature producer, person in the food chain. But you have an incredibly innovative approach to whiskey. Tell us a little bit about how you made the change and decided that this was the way to reduce waste in an industry that does not like to change.
Well, I mean, our family have been farming for 400 years, so we're just the latest custodians of the land, so the growing in food is really important to us. And when we started the distillery, I'll go vodka then whiskey. We started with the vodka, we did the first Scottish potato vodka, and actually we use the potatoes that can't go to retail. So we're actually using waste and creating a luxury product out of it. Because for us, you know, why would you waste it? And you know, when we're doing the whiskey, we'll grow a rye to make rye Scotch whiskey, the first one in the world. And you know, it was done in Scotland 200 years ago. So actually, instead of people go, oh, you're innovating, we go, no, we're not. We're actually just going back in history, because that's the way we always distilled in Scotland. And it was done on smaller scale, and it would have grown on a farm, and it would have distilled on a farm. And then government found out that they could make lots of money in taxes, and it became licensed and became large scale. But in terms of the actual production, you know, we're growing the rye or the barley next to the distillery. It gets distilled, the waste then comes out, and we feed it to our animals. And naturally, it gets recycled. It's natural, circular economy from 200, 300 years ago. We've probably forgotten what we used to know, and we're just going back to it, almost the same as you.
Yeah.
It'll be the way we used to eat and
Exactly
everything else.
that.
And everything became too easy. And, you know, we have the world's first climate positive gin. Again, you're looking at growing with peas, which no one else had done before in the world. We're very fortunate to have an amazing master distiller, Kirsty Black, who worked with the Crop Institute up in Dundee and with one of the universities as part of her PhD. So it's real global science. And you know, Nadar means the word nature in Scottish Gaelic, so it's a homage to nature. It's a homage to the fact that you know, you can create a product that is in that circular economy, but also the waste that comes out at the end of it. Again, we're feeding that to our animals, and that, you know, that gin is minus 1.5 kilos of carbon dioxide per bottle you're taking out of the atmosphere. But the most important thing, I think, in terms of farming, is that it's giving natural nitrogen back to the farm, at giving it back to the soils, and so you're in a very positive space. And I think in terms of, we worked with a European network of legumes, and they're very much looking at farming, taking on legumes and peas in particular, to give free nitrogen back to the soils, because it's there, it takes carbon dioxide out, so it's very much of the now. And it's part of that, as I would call it, the sustainable spirits movement around the world. And we're starting to aggregate, there's starting to people to get to, in that space.
That there's a sustainable spirits movement is something. And
Tasty gin as well.
yeah, tasty. The idea that you have a carbon positive gin may seem very, and I'm sure it's not inexpensive, an elitist thing, and why should we be worrying about this? But I again want to emphasize that as we start to change people's minds about where food really comes from at your places like your restaurant and your distillery, then we get a larger mindset and we start to think about farms more. And then we start to think about, you know, cover crops, so you're putting clover for one of the seasons on your field to sink carbon in and using less input. So this is all, you know, and then eventually supermarkets see that there's a market to sell this sort of thing. So it does trickle down.
And we're doing an intercropping thing, so we're actually growing peas with barley in the same field.
Nice.
So the barley gets free nitrogen from the peas. We take the peas, and either peas can be pea protein, or using it, you know, as a protein. The barley we can distill, or again, you can use it for making bread or whatever else you want to do.
We're making peas do a lot of work these days with the Impossible Burgers, and the poor pea, I feel like, needs a break. There are a few people, anybody here have a question you want to talk about waste or sustainability or how to make a good cocktail from his gin? Yes, go ahead. Oh, I know, I see the poor people. I didn't give them the cue that I was going to go to questions. Thank you, sorry about that.
So I'm a big fan of Too Good To Go. I use it a lot in London. And I wanted to ask, how are food waste and plastic waste connected? And is there ways that Too Good To Go specifically, and everyone here, can kind of tackle both at the same time?
Right, this is a huge issue, right? So packaging and plastics that come along with food. So first, let's go here, and then we'll take this up with the rest of the panel.
A really, really great question. And I think it's worth pointing out just the impact that food waste is having. So, 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions come from food waste alone, and we use a landmass the size of China to produce food, which ends up being wasted. So it's crazy, the environmental impact that's having. Similarly, when we look at things like plastic, I believe it's like 3.8% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from plastic wastage as well. And for us as an organization, our core focus is around reducing food waste. So that is predominantly what we focus on, is working with businesses and working with our consumer base to get them to engage more on the topic of food waste itself. Now, we want to do more when it comes to reducing plastic. So, what we often do is work with partners to ensure that people can use their recyclable containers. But at the same time, if we go back to the example I used of Starbucks itself, that food is already packed in plastic. So it wouldn't make sense for us to encourage people to take that out just to put it in a recyclable container. But yeah, there's certainly more that we want to be doing. I think organizations and things like that can be doing to encourage more sustainable practices of plastic.
Eddie, let me go to you. Is packaging with food something that gets discussed in your circles much, or is that, the plastic bottle not really an issue?
Plastic is a big issue, and as Slow Food, when we had our international congress in Chengdu in 2017, we actually, throughout our slow food world and also throughout our network, we came up with a declaration to stop plastic pollution. And we take plastic as one of the major environmental challenges, which are actually linked also to food, because a lot of food is packaged in plastic, but also it has to do a lot with the behavior change of the people, of the consumers, of the producers, and all the people who handle food. You still find a lot of plastic pollution, especially with the water bottles here, in many countries in Africa, many countries in Asia, where plastic management remains a very big problem. But we also, as a network, we have our advocacy strategy to turn around the laws which govern plastic pollution, which govern plastic distribution. And we have had some success stories of talking to the local governments, talking to the governments to actually implement the ban on plastics, because there are laws which many governments have passed here in Africa to ban plastic and excessive use of plastic to wrap food and other items, but these laws remain unimplemented, and also there is a conflict between business or sustaining the tax base of the country and also looking at the environment. But our network clearly works with the local governments and other institutions to keep the debate and the debate on the ban on plastics alive, and we hope that we will succeed with time.
Do you know of any local government in Africa that has banned plastic bags, for example?
Yes, Rwanda has banned, Kenya has also banned plastic, and these are milestone or landmark rulings in the African countries. Uganda tried so much to ban the plastics, but again, the law was revised to just limit the size of the plastic. The body of the plastic that is being used, because there is a big fight back from the business world, which deal in the plastics. But we also keep pushing to make sure that the environmental, health, and other public concerns on plastic are considered as a priority other than the business, in this case.
Great. Anybody else want to talk about your bottles, perhaps? And we're going to go to more questions, so just...
I mean, we just launched in the UK with a partner from Singapore, a thing called Eco Spirits, and when we export a pallet of spirits with normally cardboard boxes and 6 bottles in each one, it's on a pallet. We'd normally have 700 single-use glass bottles, but using this system, we can get rid of all of them. And so I was talking about the other day, it's very revolutionary. We're looking at, in terms of the States just now, we're working with Whole Foods in terms of the Nadar climate positive gin and vodka, but also we're looking at the States in terms of that, because when we're exporting, obviously we're exporting from Scotland to the world. You know, as a small business, I think we're exporting to about 20 countries as a 7-year-old business, but something like that is very revolutionary because you can get rid of the cardboard.
Yeah, explain, how does that look, the actual packaging?
Yeah, and the glass bottles. And they're all single use, and it's actually just taking the glass away. And then when it arrives in, say, the US, you then decant into 7.5-litre containers. That goes into the bars of the restaurants, and they can just serve them from there. Or they can decant one into a bottle that goes on a back bar.
See, so
like
it
normal.
comes to the bar or whatever in a big container like this.
In a 7.5
and then they
litre
can, that's interesting.
And it's a huge leap. I was having a conversation about distribution in Asia, and they mentioned this, and I'm like, yes, we'll have a part of that, please, because it's one of those jumps that, you know, I was speaking at a conference the other day, and the world's largest drinks business was there, and they were talking about what they were doing. But as a small business, we can take that risk or take that, you know, we just jump into that innovation.
Eco, and what's the term again?
Eco Spirits.
Eco Spirits.
Yeah. And I assume as well that the weight of transit is significantly reduced.
You know, it reduces our cost.
Yeah.
Because we're not having to pack, we're not having to put it into glass bottles. It goes into a large container. And the guys who are doing it also in a bar business in Asia, so they know what they're doing. They've been trying this for a number of years. And so whether it's Atlas Gin Bar in Singapore or Penicillin in Hong Kong, you know, they're well known and they're high end as well.
Right, so you just need to train your bar manager.
And the consumers love it, because ultimately the containers were meant to go behind the bar, but the consumers actually insisted that they put them out front, because this is a global innovation, and it's really cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. We have another. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay, I was going to say, jump in. Do we have another question out there in our vast viewing audience? No questions. Oh yes, go ahead.
Hi. You mentioned convenience. Do you feel that we have to be comfortable with some element of inconvenience if we were to transform how we do food?
Right. We don't. I mean,
that's a great question.
It's uncomfortable to do the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if any. One of the things I say a lot to young cooks in the kitchen and to my long-suffering partner and anyone else who listen is there is going to be an element of personal sacrifice to all of this, but also, like, a lot of it is just changing habits. And once you've changed the habit, it doesn't feel like sacrifice anymore. It doesn't feel like discomfort. It's just what you do now. But, you know, to get to that point, you're going to have to feel like, well, I'm making an effort here. But surely the stakes are high enough that we can all make an effort. Like, surely we're not, you know, I think a lot of these problems have been created and are compounded by an excess of individualism, by an excess of well, actually what I want has to be the thing that I get. Whereas actually there are other things, there are other people that matter, and there is going to have to be a sacrifice for us to get to the place we need to be.
Yeah, right. I think especially if anybody here has children, you realize the urgency of that, and of training early that in the same way you should make your bed every day, you should also compost your food and pick things.
It's exactly that. It's the, you know, I understand that in a restaurant on our scale, the actual, you know, the food waste that we, or the food surplus that we save is, you know, climatically it's not going to make a great deal of an impact, but what we are hoping is that the habits that we change and the culture that we contribute to is something that will grow and, you know, spread with these young cooks, with our customers as they go out into new jobs, into long careers, and into dining habits. You know, they go into new restaurants with different expectations because they've been to Inver and they can see it can work.
Yeah. And I think this is the challenge that I often tell people we can't eat our way out of climate change. We can't cook our way out of climate change. And really most of the food waste that you see, or the climate impact of food preparation and agriculture comes from transportation. It comes from loss in fields. It comes from places that aren't necessarily my carrot peels, you know? And you've worked with big corporations. Can we actually change the big powers that be that actually can do, that are causing this problem on a large scale?
Yeah, I think, I always talk about some of the stuff we're doing. We're looking at powering Distillery with hydrogen just now, with green hydrogen. And because we're of a scale, we're almost like a laboratory for the bigger guys. And you know, our industry, particularly the whiskey side, is very collaborative. Most of the master distillers have been on site. They've seen what we're doing. We're very transparent in what we do. And you know, for me, as a farmer, the most important thing is that we're responsible and we're doing things. You know, I think we're about to open up the distillery for visitors, and part of that is educating, particularly the children, where food comes from. You know, we've got a distillery, but surrounded by fields, growing lots of things with lots of animals, and actually, I think part of it is that education piece and continuous education piece of, you know, we're very lucky to have all of this food, and it's not, you know, it's not your right to have it and have it that convenience. It's actually, you know, it's quite difficult to do.
That sense of entitlement, you know, that we have in the, to be honest, in the West, but I think, you know, as Eddie was saying in Uganda as well, there's a kind of culture of expectation. Like, well, you know, I see this, why can't I have it? And it's like, well, you just can't. Sorry.
Now, come on, it's how we build all of America. Push back on this.
I might say something a bit challenging here, or challenging, because I do think, going back to that question about convenience, when we are talking about how food waste is feeding climate change, we do have to make things which are easy, right? They do need to be simple, they do need to be convenient, they need to be accessible, but they also need to be fun. And you know, we often focus on the doom and gloom of climate change, and it can feel very overwhelming, and you know, we have climate anxiety and things like this. So you know, one thing we really try to do with Too Good To Go, with our whole concept, is fighting food waste, something which is simple, accessible, and fun. I mean, you know, what is more fun than getting a whole surprise bag of food? It's pretty exciting, right? But it is also about having a simple solution, I think, for a very complex issue. And in order to bridge that gap of behavioral change, it needs to be accessible to people.
Right. And Geeta, let's talk. I did want to ask you, so are the people at the top that you circulate with, are they feeling pressure from the bottom, or is it the bottom line? Are they seeing that economically it makes more sense? Is there hope at the top there?
Absolutely. But before I go into that, Kim, I just wanted to add to the conversation going on. You know, we as consumers, taking a leaf out of everybody's book, we as consumers want healthy food, we want it sustainably grown, and we want it cheap. So this conundrum is not going to break till we also change our expectation. Food cannot be cheap if we need to really internalize the hidden costs. So that's the first thing that I think. But the second more important thing is that actually in terms of us as consumers, how we behave has a cascading effect on the entire value chain. So in fact, if we cut food waste at our kitchens, the entire value chain has less losses and waste. And I think that's a very subtle but a very profound issue we often overlook. In terms of the higher circles, interestingly, this was a forgotten agenda that somebody had mentioned earlier for the longest time, but it's coming back on the table in a big way. But it is also true that the NDCs yet are not reflective of addressing losses and waste and hitting their climate targets. But that's exactly what we've been pushing, and hopefully next year when we get together, I think the story is going to look very different.
Thank you, and what a wonderful note to end on. Thank you to this amazing panel. Eddie, thank you for coming in, and all of you, thanks for being here.